Welcome back into the Saints Insider. Today is Friday, April the 12th. I'm Zach Ewing with Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, and Jeff Duncan, and another NFL draft show coming for you today as we are within 2 weeks of the NFL draft starting on April the 25th. Less than 2 weeks, actually. Some minor news for the Saints coming in today. First of all, we'll get that out of the way right away. A couple of depth pieces added. Matt, you've been busy all morning on Zoom interviews and things like that. The Saints add Kellen Mond at quarterback, who has thrown all of 3 career NFL passes, and Equanimeous St. Brown, also known as the older brother of Amon-Ra St. Brown, who has played a little bit more, but probably still just depth at receiver.
Yeah, they're both just relatively minor moves. Both have ties to the coaching staff. Mond worked with Clint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator in Minnesota, Andrew Janoko, the quarterback coach, and then St. Brown also overlapped with Janoko in Chicago, which he actually said that Janoko reached out to his agent and said, like, hey, would you have any interest in coming here? And that's kind of how the St. Brown signing happened. So, you know, this is what happens when you change coaching staffs. All the guys bring everyone with them. We were just talking about before the show how Tre'Quan Smith is in Detroit now. And, you know, it's all familiarity and so on and so forth.
Can we go with EQ? Are we going to go with EQ on?
I was going to give Zach props for
I like St. Brown.
Trying to pronounce the
spelled out as Saint, though.
I can
that's a
say
good point.
Equanimeous. I cannot spell it to save my life. I have to look at every single letter. It's very difficult
I
to
just
spell.
copied and pasted.
Yeah.
We need to look that up. Historically, has there ever been a Saint
On the
last name?
Saints.
St. Brown.
Wow. This is the knowledge we need to come armed with. No, for Wednesday's show, we'll have
Yeah,
that.
we'll do
Is he
that.
on your all name team, Jeff?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He'd be an all-name team, right? EQ.
I remember when those guys were in high school. I was still in California, in Southern California. Some father has 2 stud receivers whose names are Amon-Ra and Equanimeous. And it's just like, what is this guy? They're both named after Egyptian gods, I
Right.
think. Yeah. So anyway, I mean, Rod, St. Brown is a legit depth piece. He's had a couple of 300-yard seasons. He started all 16 games for a admittedly bad Bears team a couple years ago. This is a guy who's got some decent NFL experience, can probably help you out in 5 receiver sets, or if there's an injury, that sort of thing.
Well, 7 receiver sets. They've picked up Cedric Wilson and
Yeah.
Stanley Morgan. I mean, this team just kind of loaded up on some guys that, they're going to be, depth pieces. I mean, that's the best way to describe them. So, I mean, I don't think he moved the needle much as far as I didn't look on Twitter after they announced it, but
He wasn't trending.
it definitely wasn't
don't think-
trending. So I don't know if that's going to be something that's going to move the needle. But I mean, he's a guy that can, probably help him out a little bit.
Yeah, Kellen Mond, probably best known around these parts for being the Texas A&M quarterback in that 7 overtime victory over LSU. He actually had a good college career. He threw for over 9,000 yards at A&M. I'm a little surprised. With Nathan Peterman, Jake Hayner, I mean, one of these guys probably ends up getting cut now. You'd think it'd either be Peterman or Mond.
Yeah, definitely Spider-Man gif. Those 3 guys just kind of pointing at each other, right?
Yeah. Or the office where they're all pointing fake
Well, I think
guns
it
at
helps
each other.
that Bond's been the system. They probably wasn't the quarterbacks familiar with that offensive system. And, I mean, LSU fans certainly don't remember him very fondly in that game. I think he had a monster game in that one, broke all kinds of records. But, I mean, 4 quarterbacks into camp makes a lot of sense. They're not going to bring anybody else. I think those 4 will make it to camp. And we'll see how it plays out. But these moves make a lot of sense in some ways. Get these guys locked up, depth pieces. It reminds me a little bit at the receiver position of what they did a year ago when they brought in Lynn Bowden and Washington, I think it was, James Washington. And
Keith Kirkwood.
Yeah, Kirkwood. There was all these kind of depth pieces that you don't have to reach for a receiver. And St. Brown's also very, he's a big guy, kind of an aspect to the receiving core that they're looking for now with Mike T out of the mix.
Our main topic today is the draft, of course, and we're going to get into that. But just a related draft question: do all these signings, Cedric Wilson and Equanimeous St. Brown, I think specifically, make you feel like it's less likely the Saints take a receiver in the draft?
No, not for me. I mean, I think it's still a need. I think this class is really good, especially in the second round. You can get a quality receiver. I think adding some veterans makes sense given how young that room is, but that doesn't stop you from drafting, a possession receiver in round 2 or anything like that.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, there's a reason these 30 visits, there's a lot of receivers coming in.
Yeah, sure. All right, today our main topic is, will the Saints trade. They're very fond of trading on draft day. In fact, they've done it, I want to say, 16 of the last 17 years now. The only exception was 2012 that did not make a trade on one of the days of the draft. So we'll talk the possibility that they would trade back, the possibility that they would trade up. First, want to let you know that we are doing our NFL draft giveaway as we continue with our draft preview shows here. And we have a couple of we're going to have some Saints Insider swag to give away. Still figuring out exactly what we'll have. We also have some Jeff Duncan books that we're going to get you to sign. One is Bags and Riches, which is, of course, the Saints going from the depths of Hurricane Katrina to have one back there to the glory of the Super Bowl. That tailed by Jeff, and then the new one. This one probably the big prize.
Fresh out of the mail.
You can't even buy this yet. Steve Gleason's autobiography written with Jeff. Do we call it an autobiography?
Memoir.
It's written with you, a memoir. Okay. So it's Steve Gleason. Jeff spent a lot of time with him over the last couple of years, and this is a special one.
Yeah, it comes out, official release later this month, April 30th, but we're just now getting author's copies in the mail, so we'll definitely have a signed copy of that. And if you get one in our goodie bag, we'll have I think our first signing in town is May 9th at Octavia Books. We haven't got the exact location yet, but you can bring that copy, and get Steve and myself to sign it as well.
Yeah. So here, the deal with that is you have to be subscribed to the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel, be in our list of subscribers, and you have to leave a comment on 2 of our draft videos, starting with last Wednesday's one. So if you left a comment on that, you've got one down, going all the way through our live show on draft night on Thursday night. So leave a comment on 2 different videos, be subscribed to the channel, and we'll pick out a couple of names. You'll each get some Saints Insider swag and one of these 2 signed books from Mr. Duncan over there. So with that said, let's roll into our draft coverage. This season's NFL draft coverage is brought to you by Tulane Doctors. Now at East Jefferson General Hospital, Tulane Doctors are bringing academic medicine to more patients in new communities. Look for the shield to know the future of medicine is here. Find your physician at TulaneDoctors.com or call 504-988-5000. Today we want to talk about the possibility that the Saints will trade. Now, as I mentioned, 16 of the last 17 years they've made a draft day trade. Every single one of those has been to trade up. Every single one of them since 2007 has been to trade up in the draft. So that is historically the much more likely thing that they're going to do. Not always drafting up in the first round. Sometimes it's just in the 5th round to jump to the beginning of the 5th round. I think they did that last year. Was it Nick Saldiveri they picked after they jumped up in the 4th round? I'm having trouble remembering the exact pick.
Sounds right.
I think that's who they got when they jumped up last year. They like to go get their guy, Rod. If they have, and this is not just first round, but even 2nd, 3rd, 4th round. If they see a name that's still there that they didn't expect to be there, they'll dump those 6th and 7th round picks and move up.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised to do it again. I don't think they'll do it in the first round. We've talked about this, but I think the tackle position is there's so much depth. I don't think they'll have to. I think they'll like whoever falls in their lap. But I can see them making a move, somewhere later on in the draft, and they got all those picks on the back end of the draft. I can see them maybe trying to package them and move up and go get somebody.
Yeah, as far as later on, I don't think those trades bother you as much, Matt, from a value perspective as we talk about the Saints needing to kind of stockpile some assets for future years. If you give up a 5th rounder or a 6th rounder, if there's a guy you really like, go get him at that point.
Right, and there's always comp picks. We saw this year the reason why the Saints maybe have ammo to move up again is because they got those 3 5th-round comp picks. They can maybe move up now. They don't have a 3rd-round pick, but maybe you can package some of those 5s and move up into the 3rd round or something. You probably have to attach future assets to that, but I'm actually interested in seeing, if they wanted to trade up in the 1st round, I actually think it may be advantageous for them. I don't think they should do it, but let's say Minnesota jumps up and grabs the 4th quarterback off the board, and if quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4, then maybe the price tag to jump up in the 1st round isn't what it would be in a normal year. They're not trading up for quarterbacks, so the price tag is going to be much lower than what it is normally.
Yeah, one of the fun things about the draft is you never can quite tell what's going to happen. Even if you think the best players in the draft, the way teams move around and take players in different positions, Jeff. But a 1st round trade up seems unlikely.
Well, I've been hearing a lot of scuttlebutt about this draft, beyond the number one pick, I think it's pretty wide open. It sounds to me like there are a lot of conjecture as to. I think there's a lot of speculation right now among the pundits out there and the cognoscente, but I think this draft could have more curveballs than others. In other words, I think a lot of these mock drafts are going to be really wrong because I think more so than ever, there's people trying to figure out where these quarterbacks are going to go, and I don't know if anybody really has a good beat on it. I heard a former executive say the other day that he thinks the top 50 boards across this league from 32 teams are more different than he's ever seen it.
Wow.
In any other draft. So I think that makes it interesting. And in regards to what Matt was saying about some of the lower picks, I did hear also very similar speculation. I think it was maybe Jim Nagy said it, that this draft really drops off after the top 4 rounds. So the Saints are sitting here with all these 5th-round picks. I don't know how valuable they're going to be to other teams. I mean, why would you want a bunch of these picks in a draft where the talent, unless there's like one or two guys you think you're going to get, it's not a great year for that because of the COVID seasons. Apparently, there's just not a lot of depth to this draft, and next year's draft is actually going to be very deep.
You probably got a lot of 24 and 25-year-old guys because they took the COVID year before coming in. Yeah.
Yeah, I was writing my linebacker preview, and I was looking at the Athletics. They released this great draft guide from Dane Brugler. It's called The Beast, and had like kind of his linebacker write-ups, and it was like there was no one linebacker so devalued that there was like no first-round grade, and then there were just like a bunch of middle-round guys. So I'm reading the descriptions, and it's all like career backup,
Yep.
rotational player, career backup, and it's like, okay, like I mean there are roles for those guys in the NFL, but if you're the Saints and you have 4 5th-round picks, that's not great.
To be fair, the Saints have been really good at finding kind of diamonds in the rough. And part of the reason for that, I think, is because they will jump up and go get somebody. If they see somebody fell to, let's say, the beginning of the 5th round that maybe other teams don't have a real high grade on, they'll package all 4 of those 5th-round picks and go up and get him and say, well, that's the guy who's more valuable than any 4 we could take at the end of the 5th round.
Right, but I think a lot of other teams are going to feel that same way. I think this draft, because it drops off, there's not much value. Now, what you might have to do is trade future picks because next year's draft, the lower round picks will be worth a lot more because it looks like it's going to be one of the deeper drafts we've seen in a long time. So maybe you do it that way. But I think these 5 or 4 5th-round picks they have aren't going to have much value.
A couple possibilities I could see for an early trade up. Maybe not 1st round, but let's say 2nd round. One of them, Rod, is what you've mentioned plenty of times. This is for Dennis Allen and this staff. Absolutely, this year is the year. There's no let's stockpile picks for future years. If you don't win this year, you're cooked. So I could see that. And the other one we'll talk about later, and that's if, let's see, other teams start a run on offensive linemen early in the draft, and then the Saints feel the need, or receivers for that matter, when you're talking about the 2nd round, the Saints feel the need and they panic a little bit and have to move up.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a run of receivers in the 2nd round. I kind of just mentioned that. I think the other possibility, if they wanted to trade up in the 2nd round, is if you wanted to go get another tackle, depending on what's going on with Ryan Ramczyk, if they don't feel confident in him, or if they draft a right tackle in round 1 and they still wanted to get a left tackle, then maybe you get aggressive and try and grab someone like Patrick Paul or someone at the top of the 2nd, because you look at the draft and some of those teams at the top, if they're going to take a quarterback, they're probably going to need a tackle to protect him. And so I think the teams at the top of the 2nd round will be looking for offensive line help as well.
Yeah, when we did our mock draft, I guess 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, I mean, we didn't really go to the 2nd round, but when I was just kind of looking at my list, I mean, I did have them possibly, going tackle again in the 2nd round. I think that's how big the need is.
Yeah, and we'll do another mock draft before draft day, and we'll see if maybe we'll go into the 2nd round and see what the possibilities are. All right, so that's the possibility of the Saints trading up. Historically, much more likely that they would do that. Trading back, you see a lot of organizations do this. I think the Steelers do it a lot. The Ravens, you see it sometimes. Some successful organizations, the Patriots have done it. Yeah. They'll trade back and stockpile later picks. Now, as far as lower down in the draft, Jeff, you talk about this being a shallow draft. Maybe that's not the time to do it. But we've talked about the possibility of the Saints trading back in the 1st round, depending on what's available. it would be pretty groundbreaking. It's never happened under Mickey Loomis. The last time the Saints traded back from their first-round pick was in 1997. They had the number 2 pick, and they traded with the Raiders and traded back to number 10. Okay? So that's 27 years ago. Clearly a totally different tenure, a totally different franchise at that point in time. Would really be breaking a trend if they did it this year.
Yeah, but I think that we need context here, and I think the context is the team's in a much different state than it was for most of those years. I mean, most of those years they were a contender, a playoff caliber team, so they could afford to go get players. The roster was flush. I think the better comparison would be 2006 to this team, where they were kind of in a rebuilding phase. They needed picks. And if you remember that year, I think they traded down in the second round, a very high second-round pick, if I remember.
They did in 2007,
okay,
for sure. I'm not sure about 06, but 07 was the last time they traded down with any pick, and that was a second-rounder.
I may be wrong, but I thought the Roman Harper pick was from a trade down. They were right there poised to take the tight end from the Houston Texans. What was his name? Owen Miller? Is that
Owen Daniels.
Owen Daniels.
Naperville.
Yes, Naperville. And if I remember correct, the Texans took him right before the Saints, and they traded down and got maybe Hollis Thomas or one of those veteran players, and also picked up Roman Harper. But I have to look at that. But my point is, you're top of the second round, first round is not much different, and they were able to parlay that into another starting player and get Roman Harper. I think they're in a different spot now. I mean, they need players. They need young players. One guy or 2 players in the top 100 is not going to help this team that much. I think they need 3 or 4 of those guys on this team because the roster position needs. I mean, we're sitting here talking. They need at least one tackle, maybe 2. Only the Saints truly know how bad Ryan Ramczyk's knee is
and what Trevor Penning's status is.
And they may not know themselves about Ryan Ramczyk's knee. Ryan Ramczyk might not know how much longer he can keep playing. So that's 2 positions I think they need for sure. I think they need another run-stuffing defensive tackle. I think they could use another young safety. Tyrann Mathieu's not going to keep playing forever. They could use another receiver. I mean, there's just all these things they need, and I doubt they're going to find those in the 5th round. So I think trying to get as many top 100 picks as they can get should be their goal.
Yeah, I think you hit on it. I think the other thing to consider, too, if you're the Saints and you were really open to trading down, is because there's actually so many tackles.
Right.
You can miss the first wave and trade back 6 spots and still get like Fontenot from the Washington kid. I'm blanking on his name.
Thiago, is that?
Fatanu?
No.
Fuagi.
Yeah, that's
No, he's Oregon State.
No,
There's
Oregon
3
State.
F's.
Fatano.
3
Yeah.
F's,
Oh, it is Fatano. Okay.
Fatanu,
Yeah.
Fuagi, and
then
Fashanu are all,
yes. Okay, all right. I had Fatano. Yeah, there we go. Something like that where you do it, or I mean, the Saints probably need another receiver too. Maybe if you trade back in the 20s, that gets you into the Brian Thomas range, unless he goes higher. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but also this team doesn't have a lot of, at least on offense, doesn't have a lot of like impact, high level talent, and so that's kind of why I think they should just stay where they are. I mean,
I guess you make the argument. Let's do a hypothetical here. Would you rather have, say they get Fashanu, right? Fashanu. I'm got to get these right. Say you get him at 14, and then you come back in second round, pick up Keon Coleman or a defensive tackle. Then you got this long drought. Would you rather have just those 2 players who might be really impact players, maybe not? We don't know 100% sure, but probably start for you. Or would you rather get the 5th tackle and trade down 5 spots or get Bram Barton, the guy from Duke that everybody says is probably a sure thing to start. He's probably never going to be an elite player, maybe solid, above average starter, and then pick up another, 3rd round pick. You see what I'm saying? Like the difference between what tackle you get at 14 and the tackle you get at 20 is probably not going to be that much different.
Let's start with the price. Let's say it's 20. The Saints trade back 6 spots. What do they get for that, Matt? What's the value?
Well, I don't have Jimmy Johnson's trade chart, which is probably outdated anyway.
Do you get a second rounder for that?
Probably
maybe,
not.
Yeah,
Third rounder?
Maybe 3rd.
Yeah.
Maybe a 3rd and like a 6th, something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think I'd rather go Fashanu at least. I'd rather get the premium first rounder If you wanted to trade back in the second round, okay.
And it may depend on what they can get, too. I mean, maybe if teams get desperate because there is one, maybe somebody's in love with Brian Thomas. Maybe somebody's in love with Fashanu and the Saints are cooler on him than we think. And they really want to get up to 14 and they're willing to give that second-round pick. That changes that equation.
Yeah, but I'm with Matt. I just think with that need there, they're just going to have to get their guy. I don't know if they are willing to, go back and get somebody who's not quite as good.
Yeah.
It all depends on
What they think,
how they feel,
what they
right,
think. I mean,
right.
do they have a guy that they think is head and shoulders above these other tackles?
Right.
If they do, then yeah, all means stay there. Don't take your chance. But if
you
these
got 'em out-
circumstances play out, yeah, then you have the opportunity to do it. It all depends on what happens ahead of them, and nobody knows that right now.
I think the best case scenario maybe for the Saints is if someone like the Colts who pick right behind them get worried, like a team like the Bengals is going to jump up and grab, Brock Bowers or
Bowers, yeah.
someone like, where they just do. You saw this in 2017 where the 49ers and the Bears swapped 2 and 3, and the Bears didn't have to give up, I think, a lot for that, but it was still advantageous to do so.
You got
And so
an extra pick
you got,
at least.
like, yeah.
So maybe, if you just trade back to 15 or 16 and you can still get a tackle because you're confident the team you're trading with is not going to take that tackle, and you pick up an extra third or fourth rounder, well,
But then if you're the
Hell, why
Colts,
not?
like, that the Saints need offensive line help, so why would you give up the extra asset? You're only doing that if you're actually convinced that the Saints are willing to trade back, which with Mickey Loomis's history. Who knows?
And I would love. I mean, obviously, we're not going to get this opportunity with Clint Kubiak. I don't know if is he ever going to talk. I don't know. Is we ever going to hear from him? Is he? Do
Can
we
he
actually
talk?
know
Is he-
Clint
yeah.
Kubiak's alive? But look, we're going to get a chance. Obviously, Mickey Loomis. He has to meet the media before the draft, and he's not going to give up anything. But that to me is the key to the whole draft: is what they think of these tackles. We keep speculating that that they're going to take the Penn State kid. And we don't know that. I mean, we have no idea. They may have him the 5th best tackle of the top 6 guys. I mean, there's just no way to know what they value. I mean, I've seen tackles all over the board, different orders. I mean, a guy came out today with J.C. Latham as the 2nd best tackle behind all. I haven't seen that, but that's a very respected draft analyst. So
I'll push back on that only. Luke's not here, but he's really good at, these are the things the Saints like. And so we can look at historically they've drafted athletic players, the players of this size, players that have been team captains, this thing. And so we can at least form an intelligent guess.
But all those guys are big, fast. None of them are. The difference is, what are you good at? Like
You're splitting hairs, at some point.
Yeah, I mean, none of these guys don't fit the Saints prototypes. I can't think of any of them that don't fit their size, speed kind of prototypes. So I don't think it's down to that. I think it comes down to what do they want to do in this offensive system, and what traits does that guy have, or do they think they can develop? I don't know, and I don't think any of them stand out other than Joe Alt. I think he's pretty clearly the number one tackle.
But he won't be there.
Right, he's not going to be there. So, I mean, in other words, what I'm saying is I don't think the Penn State kid stands out on any of these, at least what I'm reading, on any other draft boards where he's automatically the number 2 guy. I haven't seen that in anything I'm reading.
Well, that would lend to the argument that trading up in the first round makes no sense. If what you're saying is right, and these guys are not dime a dozen, but
you
but
would
it's,
trade up for all.
but you're splitting hairs. Now, could you trade up for all? So let's transition into this. What teams who draft before the Saints do you need to keep an eye on who could start a run, probably most pertinently on offensive tackles, and now all of a sudden, instead of just 1 or 2 being gone by the time the Saints pick, there's 5 gone, and that changes the Saints equation, or possibly wide receivers, Matt. And the first team that you highlighted picks at number 5. That's the LA Chargers.
Yeah, and it's really going to be interesting what they do because, if Arizona stays where they are and picks Marvin Harrison, are the Chargers willing to trade back? Are they going to stay there and start their run on wide receivers? They need wide receiver help after losing Mike Williams and
Keenan Allen.
Keenan Allen, thank you. Or, Jim Harbaugh made it a show at the owners' meetings to talk how the offensive line is the only position that you can't function without, and everything is connected through the offensive line, offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. And so, if they trade back to say 11, that puts them right in the tackle range, or do they really start it early with going for alt? I actually, last time we were on this show or we were doing the mock draft, we were talking about a tackle for them. I actually don't think Joe Alt. I think Rashawn Slater's really good.
Yep.
He's a really good left tackle. I think they're set there. So they seem more like a J.C. Latham team for me, but that's a team that I think could get the tackle run started, depending on where they pick, especially. But that's the first team I think, if you're the Saints, you're really monitoring what they're doing.
Yeah, and because they already have their quarterback set, they become an obvious target for somebody who might want to trade up.
Yep.
With them.
Yeah.
And obviously the Falcons as well, now that they've invested in Kirk Cousins, they could trade down.
We'll talk about the Falcons in a minute. After the Chargers pick at 5, it's the New York Giants. Probably most people think receiver for the Giants.
Yeah, or quarterback.
Or quarterback. Anybody could take an offensive. I mean, nobody has enough offensive linemen, right? Like anybody could. That's kind of the point. And then at 7 is the Tennessee Titans, the next team that's really likely, if Joe Alt is still there.
You think they're definitely going to get a
Yeah. Then Joe Alt seems like he's bound for Nashville.
Yeah, I that makes the most sense, is the Joe Alt team. And unless they really like what Jeff was saying, we don't know the orders of these teams. Maybe they like Latham the best or Fashanu, then Alt follows. But
yeah, you got
just seems
Callahan, who's the son of an offensive line coach who's on
Callahan's
his staff.
there.
Yeah, so certainly that would make a lot of sense.
yeah, Alt.
And then you had the Jets and the Raiders who could also get a tackle. But I think outside of those, was that 14?
Broncos, maybe? Broncos, the third team we mentioned.
No.
I don't think they go that way. I'd be a little surprised if they did.
Yeah, they have Garrett Bowles at left tackle, and then they signed McGlinchey last year.
Yes.
So, yeah, their tackle situation, I put them there just because, you never know what Sean Payton knows these guys kind of inside and out. He brought in Cody Rager. It makes sense. Maybe why I'm interested to see what they do is if the Saints wanted to go elsewhere on the offensive line, then maybe they pick, if they wanted to go cornerback, are they going to pick the Toledo kid? I just am interested to see what they do, just because of the similarities between them and the Saints right now.
Yeah, I think the Broncos could take a tackle, but I think it's unlikely.
Chargers and Titans are probably the two, as far as offensive tackles go. But what we don't know, Rod, is 3 teams could jump into the top 10 who need tackles because they think there's going to be a run on tackles, and that's how these things happen on draft day.
Yeah, and I think, going back to what Matt said, I think, to me, the Chargers is the one that kind of could throw everything off. If the Chargers don't get a tackle, and I don't think they will, I think they do get a receiver because they missing because they lost Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. So I don't think the Chargers will throw everything off. But if some teams jump in, it gets pretty interesting if some teams try to jump ahead of the Saints, because everybody knows that's what the Saints want.
But I think it's unlikely a team trades to get a tackle because there's all these other tackles.
That's true.
Right. I mean, you're going to trade to get a quarterback or one of these big receivers.
It would take a run. It would take two or three teams taking a tackle, and then teams would panic,
I don't even think
the Saints.
because there's so many options. I mean, I think the teams trading it up are going to go for the positions that have less options. Quarterback, receiver, something like that, elite players.
I think the Jets are an interesting one to monitor too, because even though they signed Tyron Smith and they acquired Morgan Moses, so that's theoretically your left tackle, your right tackle, they've been so banged up on the offensive line that maybe they just see this as, we can't afford this to be sunk again, especially if Aaron Rodgers, if this is his last year. Maybe they draft a Fuaga and kick him inside to guard for a year. I think if we're saying, all right, when is the tackle run going to start, or when does this really get going, that 10 range, 10, 11, just kind of that area is when it would start after all. If all starts at 7, that other range just ahead of the Saints is kind of where I'm monitoring to see what happens.
Titans 7, Jets 10. Who's got the 11?
I think the Vikings.
The Vikings have 11. We expect them to trade up, so that could be, that could be the Cardinals, or could be somebody who's in the
Chargers,
top. Yeah,
Where are the Falcons at?
And that's the other piece I was going. Then you have Jets and Raiders at 12, 13. In the middle of all that is the Saints division rival. So while we're at it, let's talk what the Falcons may do at number 8. Obviously signed Kirk Cousins. They had a pretty good offensive line last year. Don't think that's where they're going to go. They have some skill players. I mean, this is actually a pretty well-balanced roster. So where do you see the Falcons going?
I know a lot of people are saying, they might try to get another receiver. But I think with them getting Drake London and Darnell Mooney, they got Kyle Pitts. They got a good running back. So I just think they're going to go to the defensive side of the ball. And I mean, if Dallas Turner's there, I don't see how you pass him up if you're the Falcons. So I expect him to pick Dallas Turner.
Could be the first defensive pick of the whole draft.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would expect them to go edge rusher just because, they've invested so much into the offense, but they had a nice defensive line last year. They gave the Saints some problems, but it just is lacking that kind of star impact pass rusher. And even though you've committed so much to the quarterback, your defense still needs to perform.
Raheem Morris is a defensive guy. He's got a different system than what they were running before. So I think it'll be interesting. I think they still, though, struggled to actually get to the quarterback. They were not that bad pressuring, but dropping the quarterback was a big problem. But they've also had that problem for years and invested, like the Saints, a lot of draft capital in the first round to take some edge rushers, and it hadn't panned out. So, I don't know. I think they're a real wild card team, but I think they could be a definite candidate to trade down because their needs really are not that great at some of the key positions.
Yeah, definitely true. And then who trades up with them, that can affect the Saints as well. So subscribe to the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel if you haven't already, and leave a comment on 2 of our draft preview videos. That gets you eligible to enter for a couple of giveaway packages. One will have Jeff's Bags to Riches book. The other will have, not even out yet, but we'll get it to you as soon as it's out on April the 30th, A Life Impossible. That's Steve Gleason's memoir, co-written by Jeff, and pretty special. We'll get him to sign it for you and have some Saints Insider swag for you as well. Sign up for notifications on the YouTube channel. Also leave 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Going to end with this. Let's run the room. Call your shot, Jeff. You first. Will the Saints spring a draft day trade on either? Let's leave out Saturday. We're not talking about the 5th round and below, but on either Thursday or Friday, the 1st or 2nd round pick. Yes or no? Do the Saints trade one of those picks?
Yes, I think they have to. I think they have to get more picks in the top 100.
So you're saying they will trade and they will trade back?
Yes.
All right, Matt.
I say yes, but trade up in the 2nd round.
Trading up in the 2nd round. How about you, Rod?
I'll be the contrarian and say no, not at all. I think they just stay put in.
Pick at 14 and 45.
Yeah.
I think I'm actually with Rod, but we'll see.
I might. Just hear. He didn't make a convincing argument, but I'm still convinced.
It takes 2 to tango, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the thing is you have to have a partner, and it depends on what they're offering.
Right.
Right. And can this negotiation begin? Can you get in a position where you're almost holding an auction for one of those picks, and you can get more than you thought you would initially? Kind of like the Bears with the number 1 pick last year ended up getting a king's ransom for that number 1 pick. So we'll see. That's definitely one aspect of this draft. We'll be back with a couple more draft shows next week. We'll do another mock before the draft begins, and then we'll have our live draft show on these same channels Thursday night. Myself and Jim Derry will host. These guys will join us live from the Saints facility with their takes as the night goes on. Until next Wednesday, we'll be back with you. Thanks for watching the Saints Insider. Subscribe to the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel. For Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, Jeff Duncan, Norman Bell is our producer, and I'm Zach Ewing. We'll see you next time.